Hey guys, we're back for a special edition of The Point. I'm your host, Shannon Wiggins, and today we're giving an update on the city's 50 Worst Properties program, a program that's designed to improve the quality of life in existing neighborhoods. To give us this update, I'm here with East Point Special Projects Coordinator, Geneasa Elias, and the Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development, Vincent Washington. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
No problem. So, Geneasa, what exactly is the 50 Worst Properties program and how did it start?
Wow, believe it or not, the city of East Point started trying to tackle this issue as early as 2007 with the implementation and adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code. And it was through that code that a task force was created that included police, fire, and the planning department to actually come together and start identifying ways to address blighted properties here in the city of East Point. So from that adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code, fast forward, I guess about 3 more years, Chief Cloud, who was the chief of the fire department at the time, took the lead in saying, hey, we really need to start focusing on addressing the issue of vacant, abandoned properties in the city of East Point. So you had staff from the planning department, which included Vincent Washington. There was staff from the fire department, which included Chief Corey Thornton. And then from the police department at the time, he was Lieutenant Darryl McCullough, who's now Major Darryl McCullough. So these 3 guys came together along with HB, Bruce Halliburton, in the police department and code enforcement. The 4 guys came together. They pretty much started the task force, and they literally each week would drive around the city identifying properties which would become known as the 50 worst properties in the city. And the reason 50 was that magic number because at the time it was determined that 50 properties were about the number of properties that staff would be comfortable with addressing. So then from there, we started collecting properties 2010. We collected 50 more in 2011, and then another 50 around 2012. So the list kind of continued to grow to approximately 187 properties that we have currently listed within the program.
So we've talked about the history of how the 50 Worst Property program got started here in the city of East Point, but we really need to talk about what our current council has done to expand the program. In the fiscal year 2018 budget, council made a concerted effort and firm decision that East Point is now going to truly tackle this issue of vacant and blighted properties here in the city of East Point. So no longer is the 50 Worst Properties program an initiative, it is now an actual department for the city of East Point. So we are now in the 2nd year of the program actually being its own department for the city of East Point to address the issue of blighted and vacant properties here in the city. As its own department, the 50 Worst Properties program actually has trained, certified staff to self-perform the work that's involved with the program. From the operations side, not only do we have our equipment operators who help with the demolition of the property, but we actually have staff who have been certified as asbestos abatement workers, abatement testers, and asbestos abatement supervisors. Because we're able to self-perform the abatement process as well as the demolition process, we're actually saving money for the city of East Point rather than having to actually go out to bid and hire a private contractor.
So Vincent, how does the removal of unsafe residential structures, blighted properties, how does that impact its neighborhood and surrounding areas?
Okay. Well, we approach the 50 Worst Properties from a health, safety, and welfare standpoint. And at that point, we inspect the properties for structural integrity issues. We inspect the properties for blight issues. We inspect the properties for vagrancy, drug activity, illicit activity. And then once the properties are cleaned up, removed, demolished, then they affect the neighborhood in that they remove all these items from the neighborhood, the blight, the illicit activities, the vagrancy. And a lot of times what we end up running into is with these is that we'll walk into a property and it is fully occupied by vagrants. They have them set up as though it's a home. And then it's also been effective in that we've helped. In one situation, a young lady was living in one of these blighted properties, and she was going to school every day, but she had set up residency in these property, and we actually ended up getting her in touch with some folks that could really help her out.
She was a student at Tri-Cities at the time.
Yes, she was a student at Tri-Cities at the time. And the thing about it, she was going to school every day, but she would go home. This would be her home.
Oh, wow. So this program is really making a lasting impact on not just the neighborhoods, but the people in this community as well.
Yes, most definitely.
And so how does a property get on the list, and what is the procedure to getting it removed?
That might be a good Vincent question.
Well, as she noted, we have several different ways outside of, she spoke earlier, as we go out, we would identify them, physically identify the properties. We would also take into account properties that might, have been major complaints on, and properties that just posed problems for the neighborhood. And then once they are put on the list and once they're added to the list, once they are identified, then as she spoke earlier, we would go out, we would inspect them and see what level they were, if they really deserve to be on. Because every property that's on the list does not require to be demolished. Most of them may have been just as far as cutting the grass, boarding, because those is how we first start with the properties. We identify them. Chief Corey Thornton would go out and inspect as well as far as what needs to be immediately boarded. And it came with that. One of the other reasons why we identified them through the fire department first, because the fire department, with the code, the fire code, you actually have to act immediately. With codes such as the building code and the property maintenance code, you have to give an opportunity to abate the issue. So for an example, if we notice a house and we notice a property that needed some attention, we would have to give a reasonable amount of time to remove the blight or to abate the blight. With the fire code, we could have a request for it to be removed immediately.
And so also the courts is involved, right? In this, are they involved in the procedure as well?
Yes, actually the court process is one of the main processes for even allowing us permission to go on the properties, to even board and cut the grass. Our city solicitor, Antavius Weems, is the lead on the program through our courts department. He, along with Judge Oliver, work together in ensuring that we're able to present those properties before the court and actually obtain any type of orders that we may need to obtain. Some orders that we get are just simply for cutting the grass or boarding the properties to make sure that they are at least secure. Because as Vincent said, all of the properties on the list are not necessarily properties that need to be demolished. They just need to be secured to try and keep people from coming in. But then there are those properties in which demolition is warranted. So even before we knock down one brick or one piece of siding on a house, we would have had to have gone through our municipal court system in order to get permission to go on those properties. And then just also to let people know, we try our very best not to use city resources to deal with these properties. A concerted effort is actually made to try and find the actual property owners. But unfortunately, they just don't appear. So even though we haven't been able to find the property owner, the nuisance is still there, which poses a threat to the existing neighborhood. So the city does use its resources at that point to at least remove the nuisance. But once we remove it, we do lien the property to try and that we're able to recover any cost that was associated with labor, material, equipment, in demolishing or even boarding those properties. But again, we wouldn't be able to do this without our court department, the chief judge, and our city solicitor.
And I think another thing too that we have to address is that our legal department ensures that we're doing everything legally, as far as the way we approach the properties, the time frames, like Geneasa said, getting the court orders to actually be on the properties to abate them, and ensuring that we as a city are not held liable for acting out of turn. I guess you say so.
Yeah, because the last thing we want to do is demolish a property and then an owner show up and say, you tore down my house and I didn't know about it. So I know both Judge Oliver and Solicitor Weems really stressed to us the importance of notification and making sure we do more than one form of notification. So we instituted a process actually earlier this year. We actually end up sending 2 notices. Both of those notices include whatever the violations are, as well as they even give them an opportunity to come into the office to try and rectify the problem before we even get to court. That second notice does include the court date, but in addition to that, we created placards that are actually posted on the properties themselves. Now, believe it or not, we don't know why. We find out that some of these owners are not necessarily absentee like we thought. Because we find out they are actually receiving the notices. But believe it or not, it's not until we actually post a placard on the house that people start calling.
Yeah. Yes, it's funny. It seems as though it's not serious until they actually see the placard go up on the property. And the good thing about it is once we do make contact with the owners, we do have a process once that's in place where we require them to register the property on the vacant and foreclosed property registry. And if we do get them in court, we sit down with Solicitor Weems and we work out some form of consent agreement to give them opportunities. Like Geneasa said, we try not to expend city resources unless we actually have to. And we work out with Solicitor Weems, they work out a consent agreement as to how they're going to abate the property within time frames. And so it's, yeah, we rely on our legal department a lot. we definitely do that. Yes.
Yeah, they give great guidance. So I know you guys get this question a lot. So whether the property is demolished or if it's secured, does the city own the property at the end of the day?
No. At the end of the day, the city has only received permission to secure the property or demolish the property, which is one of the reasons I mentioned that after we do either of the two or both, we actually will place a lien on the property in hopes that we are able to recover that cost if the property is ever sold. The only property that was on the 50 worst list that the city actually was able to gain control of is the former terraces at East Point, which is 1981 West Woodbury. But that property actually came into our hands via a consent order with the previous property owner. And as a part of that consent order, the agreement was they assisted in demolishing 2 of the units that were on the property, and the city demolished the rest of the units on the property. But then at the end, that owner agreed to pretty much quit claim deed the property over to the city.
And what areas in the city are majority of these homes located?
The highest concentrations are in Ward B, in the East Washington and River Park neighborhoods. Those are the streets around Pine Avenue, Lyle Avenue, Sylvan Road, and then Center Park, which is in Ward A, is one of our other heavily hit neighborhoods, which would include, what's that?
East Ferris, Center, Phillips,
Dunlap,
yeah, that area. Sims.
Yeah, Sims. So those areas are some of our highest concentrations of blighted properties. And I will say those areas are also the areas that were hardest hit by a lot of mortgage fraud.
Yes.
Because, you know, prior to the market crashing again around 2008, 2009, the city of East Point had been hit heavily with mortgage fraud throughout the city. And then when the market started to recover, unfortunately, it didn't recover in the same manner that some other cities adjacent to East Point experienced recovery. And then when the market crashed again in 2008, 2009, that just left those properties to really sit and become properties that could no longer actually be repaired. Fortunately now, because the economy has turned around, we do see a lot of interest in the properties, and we really see a lot of interest in the ones that we've actually demolished. Because you know, now they can start with a clean slate. But again, we do have to tell them the city does not own these properties. So just like we attempted to find the owners, you're gonna have to try and find the owner if you're interested in purchasing them.
So do people end up finding the owner and then rebuild on that property, or kind of what?
We've had a few. I think the biggest developer that comes back and to purchase these properties and builds on them is Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah.
We have had maybe one or two private investors come back and get in contact with the owners and purchase them. One of the things that we do have in place that the solicitor Williams has in place is that in those cases, most of the times when we reach out to the owners, they try to get off of the properties, they try to move. So he actually goes out and places less pendants on these properties so that they can't sell. Because then we find ourselves in a situation where we're starting the process all over again. We are having to reach out to the new owners, and we end up getting it's a huge setback for us. So that's one of the things that our legal partner does. Once the liens have been cleared, if we have done any work on the properties, then they have been sold, and then they will either rehab them or demolish them themselves, or purchase and build new if we've demolished the property.
And to date, how many homes have been demolished or secured, and what's the future of the 50 Worst Properties program?
So to date, well, we ended up with about 187 properties that were identified over the last 5 to 7 years. Of those 187 properties, approximately 62 have actually been demolished. There may be about 5 of those 62 that were demolished by the actual owner, but for the most part, the city has demolished pretty much almost 60-some properties. Other properties that are on the list may be properties that are still under consent orders. There are some that are still under active court cases. Some of those 187 homes have actually come into compliance. They've been renovated. They actually have people living in them now. And then we're now getting ready to work on the last 35 properties that were on that original list of about 187. So our court date is November 28th. If anybody's just interested in coming to see the process in action, they're welcome to come because it is open court. They're welcome to come to the East Point Municipal Court just to see exactly the process that we go through in order to get permission to demolish those properties.
Yes, and if you have a property, come down and see us.
Yeah, how can people put a property on the list?
Well, you know, they actually can't put a property on the list because we go through our process. But if you know that you have a property and you know that it has been placarded, and you don't want to reach out, or you have not attempted to reach out to us, the court date, as she said, is November the 28th. So you can come and appear and represent your property if you do not want it to move forward with our legal process. Because most of the properties we will be requesting demolition on this go around. We've gotten our orders back on our last court date to board and secure. What was it, 12 properties, I believe? Yeah, 12 properties. Those have been done. So we're moving forward with the demolition phase next for this next group of homes.
And then for any new properties that East Point residents or business owners may be aware of, please contact us. You can either email me at gelias@eastpointcity.org or give me a call at 404-270-7026 and just give us the address. You don't even have to give us your name. Just let us know, hey, there's a property, a residential property next door to me. It's been sitting here for a while. The grass hasn't been cut. Looks like the structure is not that stable. Just give us the address. We have vagrants hanging around the property. Let us know, because our best eyes on the street are the people who live here and travel the streets every day. You know, we catch some ourselves when we're out and about going through the city conducting business. However, we really rely on people who live here to tell us what's going on. So if they just give us the address of the property, we will then start cataloging the next phase of properties that the city will probably have to address under the 50 Worst Properties program, and we'll just start this whole process all over again. Because we know there are more than 187 out there. We just need people to feel comfortable and say, hey, can you check out this property? You know, it's just a simple phone call or an email.
Definitely need community involvement.
Yes, definitely.
And I think another important fact, if I may, is we're going into the winter season, so our vagrant activity is going to pick up. And one of the biggest issues that we have with vagrant activities are vacant property fires. And normally they are caused by the vagrant activity, them trying to sit and, you know, stay warm and keep warm in the houses. They end up starting fires inside these properties, and the fires get out of control. So that is a key feature. So if you do, as a homeowner, and you do see vagrant activity, please let us know with the her phone number that she gave you, her contact information, and also our C-Click Fix.
Oh, that's right.
You could also go to the city's website, and which is eastpointcity.org, and use the C-Click Fix link.
And also by downloading the Access East Point app.
Yes.
Yes. And so lastly, who are the different partners that you all work with to make this program a success?
We have a lot of East Point partners, which we cannot do any of this without them. So of course, first and foremost, we have our municipal court chief judge, Judge Oliver, and our city solicitor, Antavius Weems, who's also under the city attorney's office, under Brad Bowman. So definitely, they're at the top of the list, because like Vincent said, they keep us in check to make sure we're doing everything in order. But in addition to our court and legal department, water and sewer, big part. Public Works, buildings and grounds,
Fire department.
The fire department, the police department, code enforcement, parks and recreation, solid waste. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
They are a lifesaver.
Shout out to your Horace.
And Jorge.
George, that's it. And yeah.
Let me make sure I got everybody. Water, sewer, East Point Power, Parks and Recreation, Public Works, Police, Fire, Solid Waste.
Solid waste, let's see, electrical department, especially the tree cutting division. Going back to fire, we want to thank Chief Thornton, Lieutenant Williams. Also, going back to, and I know I'm not going to do a whole long list of shout outs, but just going back, definitely water and sewer, Mike Russell. That's our excavator extraordinaire. And then we just want to say something to our guys that work with the 50 Works program, because the 50 Works program is actually staffed by 3 employees. That's Karan Taylor, that's Perez Moore, and Brandon Smith.
And then, of course, you can't forget the planning department, because believe it or not, we actually have to pull permits too. We don't, you know, we are the city, but we just don't go out there and bore or tear something down. We actually go through the demolition permitting process as well. So that same process that we require of private owners when they're coming in to demolish a property, we do the exact same thing. And we don't knock it down until we actually have a permit in hand to knock down the property.
Well, thank you all so much for joining me today, and continue to keep up the great work here in the great city of East Point.
Thank you.
No problem, no problem. Thank you all so much. Please remember to follow us on our social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at City of East Point. Also, download our Access East Point app and sign up for Code Red for emergencies. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this special edition of The Point. I'll see you next time on The Point.